Antonio, what's up, man? How you doing?
Not much, man. Finally made it here.
Yeah,
It was
I appreciate you
long
coming.
overdue, for
Yeah, I
sure.
appreciate you coming. I've
Yeah.
known Antonio for about 6 years, and
Yeah.
you're a black belt under Hobson Moore.
Yeah. I initially was under Adriano Lucio over when I was in Tallahassee,
That's right. Okay.
up until my purple belt. Then I moved to Tampa, and I started training at South, and then over HQ. So I was like always back and forth, depending on my schedule, because it was kind of like
I've been
weird.
there. I've rolled with a few of those guys.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
in
yeah.
Nogi.
Well, you did
I'm
you
scared of. I'm scared of you guys.
you nah. Lately you did a seminar over at South.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a good time. We went
Yeah.
over some back stuff, and the reason Antonio is here, one of the reasons is I invited you to do a gi seminar.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to talk with you about what you feel the benefits of gi training are, especially for beginners.
For beginners.
What do you think? Why would you tell a white belt like, look, even if you like no gi better, you should still train the gi?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's going to take some time before they realize which one they like more. Right? I don't think they right out the bat, unless like I was actually listening to a podcast, the interview you had, where you were like, well, you started on wrestling, so you were like immediately.
I was already brainwashed.
Right, you were immediately into the nogi and stuff. But I think like generally speaking, like it really takes like a few months before you're like, okay, I'm leaning more towards the gi or more the nogi.
Right.
But definitely, I would encourage everyone to like. I didn't train much nogi in the beginning. I did it when I was doing some MMA. And they were doing like no-gi, obviously.
Right.
But then when I actually just started doing pure jiu-jitsu, it was just the gi. And yeah, I think I wish I would have like really done a little more of both at the same time.
Because you didn't come from a wrestling or a judo background, right? You just went straight into
No, I did a little judo right before. So I started with judo, did it for a few months. Then I switched over to MMA, and then just pure jiu-jitsu.
Oh, interesting. So you did a little bit of gi, and then no gi, obviously, because you were doing MMA and then did both. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like, I obviously started with a wrestling bias, so I already was deep into the no-gi. And I'm sure people that do judo first already have that bias towards the gi because it's what they're used to. But, a new person, that hasn't done either, that's a good point. Try both, see which one you like better. And, what I advise people, and this is what I did, and I'm grateful to my instructor Sonny, even though now he doesn't ever do the gi. He got rid of it. But when I was training with him, it was like 60-40, like 60% no gi, 40% gi. And I trained at about that split until I got my purple belt, and then I was like, all right, I'm just doing
the no gi.
But so the point that Danaher has made about this, and I agree with him, is that the gi trains you better defensively. So in no-gi, there's a sweat factor. There's a lot less friction. It's a lot easier to blast out of things and explode out of things. And in the gi, your defenses need to be a lot more technical, and a lot more tight. And the opposite is true for offense because there's a lot of friction in the gi, right? There's the grips, which allow you to, pull yourself into your opponent a little bit more. And, you may be able to get away with submitting people while being looser than you would have to be in no-gi. Like no-gi, your offense needs to be really, really tight because of the sweat, of your opponent's ability to explode out of stuff. So, for beginners, that's you guys, white and blue belts, right? I advise you guys to do a split of both. And you guys can always cross-train if your gym only offers one. If your gym only offers no-gi, you can cross-train and do gi, or vice versa. But I think it's really useful in that regard. So is that something you found, or do you have other benefits that you see?
Yeah, well, I think you make a good point about the if you're doing no-gi, passing the guard, once you get to pass the guard and stuff like that, you really have to be tight.
Oh yeah.
Because it's very easy to like just scramble out of it. Like you have mentioned, the athleticism and strength and sweat and whatnot all plays a huge factor in the no-gi. To where in the gi, like even generally speaking, even if you're stronger than me, I might be able to get a couple grips and I can pin you down.
Yeah.
Right?
Speaking of the grips, that's a huge point too, is like the grip fighting in no-gi is so much more fluid than it is in the gi.
Yeah.
Like in the gi, it's like if your opponent gets a good grip on you, like that sucks.
Yeah.
And they can hold on to that for a long time until they eventually get what they want.
Yeah.
And in no-gi, it's a lot easier to strip grips and defend and flow. So like, I now wrestle a lot more conservatively. I used to be, a lot more aggressive and just going after it. But, I play a lot tighter of a game and I make sure I have the grips that I want in no-gi. And part of it was realizing that, oh man, if I just like dive in the gi without having what I want,
Yeah.
and my opponent gets good grips, like
Yeah,
this is
definitely.
gonna suck for me.
Which
So,
is, I think, the other two very big components of the gi. For me, I think one huge thing is I feel like I develop a pretty decent guard from the gi, same as a really good balance for the same reasons. If you get some really good grips on me, if you're on top, you can easily
yeah,
pass.
dude, those grips
Yeah.
on the knees are, you know,
Yeah, like
that's a guard pass.
so you gotta address those quickly. And then the same thing, like if you're on bottom and you're going to sweep me, I really need to like develop my balance in order not to get, because you got everything, right? You can grab both my legs,
Right.
and generally speaking, you're gonna go down.
Yeah, so like the early defense and like the early grip fighting, I
Yeah.
think matters a lot more.
Yeah,
you
it
know?
matters a lot more, yeah.
And not to say it doesn't matter in nogi. That's obviously
No, it obviously
that's
doesn't.
obviously not true. You know, I'm just saying like it's a lot easier to defend a bad grip that someone else has on you in nogi. You know,
Yeah.
because you can just roll your way out of it. I still think, by the way, the nogi grip fighting is super important.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, in the general principle is the same in both, right? Like you got to win the micro battles before you win the macro battles, before you win the major battles. And so that's grip fighting.
Yeah.
That's all that
Yeah.
it is, you know. So you got to do that in gi or no gi. It's just, you know, in the gi, if you let your opponent start off with a tough grip,
With a tough
you know,
grip,
it's
yeah.
so much harder to win that
Yeah.
micro battle just off the bat, you know.
Oh
So,
yeah, I do try to tell every time I teach to not start passing anyone's guard without you having a somewhat of a decent grip or
That's
a better
great,
grip
yeah.
than your opponent. And I can't address enough how many times you should break the grip before you pass. If the person grabs your grip 20 times, you should break it 21 times
Yeah.
before I pass. Otherwise, chances are you're going to get swept.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say like a good dominant grip in nogi, you know, let's say it turns. So maybe a similar dominant grip in nogi makes a situation 60-40. In the gi, it's like 75-25,
Yeah,
I would say.
100%.
Because they can hold that grip on for much longer. And so for nogi people, you know, it's like just because the grip fighting happens quickly, you know, don't ignore it and like you
Right.
said, just blast through. Like I would say the same thing to my students in nogi. I'm like, yeah, don't pass the guard if you don't have good grips, right? I have a saying, don't accept bad grips.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
if you accept a bad grip, right, you're basically saying like, I'm fine with my opponent having a greater than 50% chance of winning this next
Yeah.
exchange, which you shouldn't want, you know. So
Well, I think that's why, like, for example, in judo is like, I would say maybe like 90% of their battle, right, before someone wins.
yeah,
It's like they address the grips. They don't, like, because one grip is the end. And like with judo is one of those things where it's like one throw ends the fight.
yeah,
We're a little luckier when it comes to that because even if I get swept, I might have some time to recover if we're somewhat at the same level.
yeah.
Because if not, then it doesn't matter. You know, I just gotta wait for you to make a mistake. But yeah, the grip fighting is like key.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. You know, in judo, it is interesting that like one ippon wins.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know, it's not that dissimilar to a street fight necessarily
No.
though. Like you get a hard throw on somebody.
You're
like,
going out.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
it.
I mean, you know, people in MMA get thrown a lot, but you know, we're on a springboard
Oh,
canvas,
yeah, that's
right?
best case scenario.
There's so much less impact, and it's being so diluted because of that. And sometimes people still get knocked out from throws.
Yeah.
You know, it still happens. But you know, you do that same throw on concrete,
You probably
know,
die.
Yeah. If not die, you're at least getting a serious brain bleed.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a serious concussion. So you know, yeah, I think that rule set is pretty aligned with what the incentives of self-defense are. Like you get a hard throw, you get someone to land hard on their head, like it's over. You know?
Yeah.
I actually do wish jiu-jitsu scored takedowns. Like that was a more general thing. Like they scored takedowns in that way. You know, I don't know how they would do it because it's kind of difficult. Like some takedowns lead into your opponent's full guard, and it's like, well, that's not as good as a takedown that leads to side control, or like a duck under that leads right to someone's back. You know. So I don't know how they would incentivize it, or you know, even a throw that you know you throw them hard and they land hard on their back. You know.
Yeah.
So you know, I like how judo stresses that takedown element. Although I think their rules are completely dumb because they don't allow leg-based takedowns, which is just insane.
They did right before.
They did. Yes, and they took it away, which was a silly rule. You know, and I'm generally very, very biased towards, look, if if it makes sense from a perspective of like, okay, this isn't going to cause massive, consistent, serious injuries,
Right.
then I would have people do those moves, like heel hooks, everyone says are very dangerous, right? But as long as you're experienced and you recognize the position, you can tap without hurting yourself,
As opposed to a takedown.
Yeah, as opposed to a takedown. Takedowns you can injure yourself too.
Yeah.
But when you start eliminating certain things, and I think there's some corruption involved in that as well. Like one country gets really good at one thing, and all of a sudden it's illegal 4 years later. It's like, all right, come on. We see where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think like the best rule sets are the least restrictive in terms of what you can do. So if we're doing a grappling-based martial art, all legitimate grappling techniques should be allowed within reason, right? We don't allow single-digit manipulation, which is good.
Yeah, that's for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but the other stuff I think makes sense. I think allowing as many submissions as possible makes sense. I think allowing as many takedown options as possible makes sense. At least at the pro level. If you want to make an argument that okay, this takes a very advanced break fall to like survive,
right to survive,
okay, then maybe reserve that just for the pros. Kind of like how ADCC has the slamming out of submission rule, which I support, by the way. I think it's a good rule, but it's just for pros, right? That's a pro level tournament. It's not an amateur tournament. Amateur tournaments, blue belt division, I don't want blue belts like slamming each other out of submissions, but
a little broken arms.
Right. But at the pro level, I like that because it shows that, yes, there is this self-defense component here that we got to account for. Like, like that guy who got slammed out of the buggy choke in ADCC. That was that video that was going around. It's like, well, you probably should have let go, in a street fight, like you said, you could die.
You could die, yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I don't, when it comes to like the whole submissions, I don't think there should be any restrictions. I highly encourage to have like options as opposed to like one tournament doesn't want to do it, the other tournament wants to do it, and that's great.
And I think it should go by rank as well.
Right, definitely.
I don't think white and blue belts should be doing heel hooks, for instance.
And I don't think it's
or neck cranks or anything like that. But I think brown black belt, heel hook, certain kinds of neck cranks I think are fine. I think that's good. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't disencourage, like, to me, like the whole heel hooks and stuff like that, I don't see it so much like, for example, in white blues. It's obviously there is like that, injury component of it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times they're throwing into that without having like a very good principle of like the rest of their game. And I think that's more of how we can neglect their jiu-jitsu rather than like the students getting hurt all the time.
I agree 100%. And by the way, take this from someone who dove deep into the leg lock game when I was a blue belt, right? And I did neglect other parts of my game. It's like, all right, I can submit brown and black belts occasionally that at the time didn't know anything about leg locks, but my guard passing sucked, my guard sucked, my ability to escape from pins was terrible. So it's like I had all these other skills that it's like, okay, I could sit on my butt or take someone down and scoop up a leg and finish a leg lock on someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But I can't pass guard, I can't hold pins, I can't escape pins, So it's like there's other way more important skill sets. I think that's a great point. And I do teach my students, from early on, I do teach them legs, but it's a small percentage of the curriculum. And I always tell them like, look, there's way more important skill sets you need to focus on first. Once you're like blue, purple, that you can start integrating it into your game, but make sure you're still working the fundamentals.
I think it definitely should be something that you apply if the first of all, it has your A game, go for your A game, right? But if in competition, but if it's something that kind of develops throughout your role, great, by all means go for it. But I've seen a lot of students getting frustrated for not being able to pass a guard and stuff like that, and they dive right into like a leg lock or stuff like that, just because they're not able to do the other thing that they should know at that point. So that's
a great point. And I don't know if you watched the Danaher podcast when he talked about where leg locks fit into jiu-jitsu, right? He talked about the 4 steps of jiu-jitsu, the takedown, the guard pass, the pin, the submission, and he's like, well, leg locks just work whenever you can't get any of those 4. And it's like, well, what if you suck at all 4 of those things and you're kind of good at leg locks? Well, the incentive is to always go for the leg lock, right? Like you said, and then you're neglecting the four steps, the principles of jiu-jitsu. You know, so that's a great point. Yeah. So guys, listen, leg locks do work. We like to joke about it all the time. They do work, but
they do. We're all being tapped with them.
Absolutely, but make sure you're not neglecting your foundational, fundamental jiu-jitsu. You know, so anyway, I think we'll get started with the seminar.
All right, man, that's awesome.
All right, thanks, Antonio.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys. If you like this, make sure you share the video with your friends. If you like what we talked about, if you disagree with us, if you think we're dumb, leave a comment. We'll discuss it. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.